Hello. Today I'm looking at Burgundy. The wine is from a producer called David Duband. This is his Haute Cotes de Nuits, Haute Cotes de Nuits Rouge obviously. It's called Cuvee Louis Auguste. It's from the 2020 vintage. Evidently Louis Auguste is David's son, so the Cuvée is an homage to him. The estate is based in a place called Chevannes, which is right up in the Haute Cotes de Nuits So the set of hills that are behind the Côte de Nuits, and actually Chevannes is at a fair altitude in this area. The domain was started in 1963 by David's father Pierre, and David took over at quite a young age in 1991. At that stage, this quite small domain was actually only selling wine to negociants. It wasn't marketing its own wines, and David soon changed that. And in what is a relatively short period of time, he built up the estate to something in the region of 17 hectares now. It seems that for quite a while now, David has been regarded as one of the rising stars of Burgundy, and I think we're probably actually reaching a stage where actually he has risen to become a recognised producer. David's approach is to farm organically, and in fact in 2006 the whole domain became certified as organically farmed. He does also buy some fruit from other sort of small independent growers, people whose approach is sympathetic to his in terms of environmental protection and the like. David has been very successful in working with a financier, somebody called Francois Foyet, and Francois has backed him most particularly in 2005. They managed to pull off a coup and buy the majority of the vineyards holdings of Domaine Truchot-Martin when Jackie Truchot retired. And Jackie was very highly respected as a very skilled winemaker and had some really prime vineyards, particularly in the Côte de Nuits. So today, David makes wines from 23 really well-known appellations throughout Burgundy in total. His approach is quite traditional. The fruit is hand-picked, there's a degree of foot treading goes on. He uses quite large amounts of whole bunch in fermentation. He's relatively restrained with his use of oak and has tried to reduce the amount of sulphur being used in the winemaking. The vineyards used to make this wine are in Chevannes itself. They're relatively high altitude. The soils here are a blend of chalk and marl. The vine age is about 55 years, making them some of the oldest vines in the domain. The vineyards have a southerly exposure, and as I say, they're at relatively high altitude here. The fruit is hand-picked, and only about 60% of it is destemmed, the remaining 40% staying as whole bunches in the fermentation. And that lengthens the fermentation. It helps put oxygen into the fermentation. It adds the complexing flavours and tannins that the ripe stems contribute to the fermenting wine. There's a 17-day cuvation goes on, during which there are somewhere between 5 and 7 pigeages, and these involve the winemakers actually sort of getting in and foot treading the grapes, punching them back down into the fermenting wine. They will also do a number of pump overs. Through these devices, extraction from the skins and pips is managed. The wine is pressed and is allowed to settle for 2 weeks. It then goes into barrel. These will be French oak barriques, 228 litre barrels, and about 30% of those will be new, and the remaining 70% will be either first, second or third fill oak. The wine stays in barrel for 14 months, after which time it's racked off its remaining lees and then ages for a further 3 months in oak cuves prior to bottling. Bottling goes on without any fining or filtration, just to try and preserve all the aromas of the wine into the final bottle. So let's have a look at it, shall we? Swirling it. Always good to have a nice big glass for Pinot Noir, being such an aromatic variety. It allows it to really show its aromas. But swirling that around, it's really very apparent that that's not a particularly dark wine at all. It's a medium to deep ruby red colour, but I can see straight through that. That's, it doesn't have any great depth whatsoever. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas have what some people refer to as a funky nose there. There's a almost sort of slightly developed forest floor sort of note. But there are notes of spices, there are hints of sort of greenness. They're almost sort of like cedar from oak, but not quite. And that's the influence of the stems, or partially at least the influence of the stems in the fermentation. There are perhaps also some notes of oak coming through. I mean, 30% of this was in new oak, so there's a little bit of cedriness, a little vanilla. And then there are other sort of secondary aromas, sort of chocolatey notes as well. There's a certain richness to it. And behind all that, there are actually some red, maybe slightly sort of rich, plummy note, ripe red cherry, but very, very ripe notes. So there's a lot going on the nose. So let's have a taste. The palate has good acidity, it's lovely and fresh. There is this sort of slightly green, slightly oaky, but really quite exciting and complexing note of the whole bunch fermentation right across the palate there. And towards the end, there's this chocolatey smoothness that it's contributing. There's a certain amount of tannic grip as well. The acidity is giving the wine lovely length, and there's a delicate red cherry flavour on the finish with hints of sort of things like cinnamon spice, and that's lasting really quite nicely. There is that sort of smooth chocolatiness on the mid palate. The wine is a medium bodied, it's not a particularly heavy wine. The label says it's 13.2% alcohol, and there is a sort of warmth and a richness to the mid to back palate, and I think most of that's coming from ripe fruit, but a portion of that is probably being contributed by the alcohol as well, but it's reasonably well in balance. The acidity is keeping the finish fresh and it's giving good length. As I say, the wine is not particularly heavy, it's light to medium bodied, but it does have an elegance and a charm, and the wine lasts well on the finish, and there's flavour development as it's lingering in my mouth there. I'm starting with the red fruit notes, then I'm getting more sort of coffee, chocolate, mocha notes. I'm getting notes of spice, be it sort of cedar or vanilla, and also bits of sort of slight tannic grip there. So there's plenty going on, not only in the aromas, but also on the palate. The wine's freshness means it would probably age for a few years. I don't think it needs keeping. I think it's perfectly accessible now. It's delicious, it's got lovely clean fruit. The flavours last very nicely. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you found the video of interest. If you have, do please press the like button. Any comments you've got, please leave those in the feedback box below. If you have any friends you think would be interested in watching the video, do please feel free to forward it to them. Do also sign up and follow us on YouTube. It would be fantastic to have your support. But most importantly, do please try and make some time. Come and join us for another tasting in the very near future, won't you? Thanks again. Bye for now.